Hey guys, it's Paradise, and today I'm very excited because we're going to go over our impressions and an almost review of Crimson Desert because we actually got to play it at Gamescom, and I was very surprised after our hands-on session with it. I'm joined with 26 because 26, you got to play it next to me as well. We had our own little like TV screen and controller each, which is kind of rare in these events as well, where usually like one of us just has to watch or we have to like switch halfway. But we actually both got to experience it, right?
Yeah, definitely. And someone on a Monster Hunter video asked when we were going to give our impressions, and it hurt my soul because I've been eager to give my impressions on this game. Because, guys, it plays as good as the trailers, bros. It's actually sick, this game.
This was one of the biggest surprises of Gamescom for me. There was a lot of games there, and Crimson Desert is one that we've been following and covering for quite a while. And it is one of those games that when you see it, like, oh, the freaking hills in the background, the scope of the game, it looks too good to be true. But now that we've actually played a chunk of the game, and I will say what we got to play was like various of the boss fights that you will experience throughout the story. We didn't get to like go too much out in the open world and all that kind of stuff, but we did get a very good look at the boss fights and the actual combat and the sort of control scheme of the game. And it's ticking those boxes. This is like a weird mixture of some of our favorite like RPGs, but with a completely different control scheme, which I think we will talk about as we go through, because the controls are one of the most strange things. But the actual gameplay, the visceralness of it, the moves that you had, the way that you could interact with some of these bosses, and the animations of like, I don't know what you call them, finishers, parries, grapples and stuff like that is just nuts, right?
Yeah, so super crazy. The game feels like Dragon's Dogma, The Witcher, a wrestling game, and just like a fighting game all in one. It's like actually like, and I think that's one of the biggest things. It feels fresh. So a lot of the time we go into these demos and it feels like something that I've like played before. But this has been one of those previews or those games that I've like actually been super excited and surprised by because how fresh it felt to experience it. It felt like something new, but also familiar at the same time.
Yeah, I just want to say I walked away from after playing feeling even more hyped for this game, and this was already a game that grabbed our attention. So I feel like a lot of my worries are alleviated in terms of like, does this game look too big in scope and too crazy with what they're going for? And having now played it, I feel like I can see the final vision of the game come together before me, and it's going to be one of those crazy massive RPGs where you're like crafting, you're gathering stuff, you're fighting, you're doing quests, there's crazy boss fights, monsters and all that kind of stuff. And here you can see the Reed Devil boss, so that we actually can show you each of the bosses we got to fight in the actual hands-on time that we had, right, 26?
Yeah, definitely. There was like 5 bosses in total, and this was like the first boss fight. And something that like instantly sold me on the bosses as well is because sometimes you get access to certain moves that you just can't do on bosses because they're too large or whatever. But on the humanoid bosses, which there are a lot of, you can just straight up pick them up and powerbomb them, or like DDT them, or just do some crazy thing like jump off their faces as well. So it's super fun playing this game in the combat. But I think Paradise will explain in a second that even though the combat feels good, the controls for the combat are kind of jank at the same time. So
yeah, this is the thing, right? So on one hand, there are so many cool moves and iterations of moves and animations and combos that you could do that I was completely surprised by. Like, you were just discovering new things left and right. And they did say that the game just eased you into, you know, your moveset and abilities and stuff like that. But obviously in the demo that we played, you're like thrown in the deep end against the boss with everything already in the game, and there's no like tutorial or anything like that. So I'll caveat it there. But yeah, the controls were nothing like any other game that you would have played, at least recently. It doesn't have the attack buttons where you would expect them to be from other similar like big open world kind of RPGs like this. So there was a real learning curve of just trying to figure out how to control this guy. But once you kind of understood a little bit of it, it actually did click quite well. And another thing that you're seeing here, the bosses often have these like special mechanics where there's like phases or a certain thing that you have to do. So on this Reed Devil boss, you had to break these scarecrows, and I'm not gonna hide my shame here. It took me maybe like 10
you
minutes.
were struggling.
It took me 10 minutes to figure out how to destroy those scarecrows. Not because I'm stupid and I wasn't attacking them, but because you could only break them with an explosive arrow, which I didn't know I had, or a very certain like strong attack, which required a really weird like hold down of 2 buttons that I would have never guessed was a thing. So yeah, the controls very strange, but once it clicked, it felt like the gameplay feels good. So I can put controls to the side, you know, because maybe they can be rebound, maybe they'll have some feedback and change that. But what I'm more focused on is the actual moveset, which was really good, and the actual bosses that felt really responsive and engaging to fight. So this guy was teleporting all over the place, as you can see. He was kind of nuts, but he was the easiest boss in the demo, right? And then after that, we went on to this Staglord boss, right, 2-6?
Yeah, definitely. And this dude actually gave you a nice little shield if you actually, and sword if you beat him, to use in the other boss fights. But I think this is the boss fight that I enjoyed probably the most as well. And I kind of looked over to your screen to see what you were doing, and it kind of really shows the different playstyles that you could actually go for, because I saw you using the arrow, because I was struggling with this guy a little bit, just going melee, like head to head on him, but then took out the bow, and the bow's actually got this kind of Red Dead, Deadeye type of slow motion thing that you can do, where you can dodge out the way and like snipe things. So I just took this explosive arrows out, and I was just cheesing this guy, and it was just like it was super fun.
Yeah, this guy was like, so you can literally see it here. He's a brawler. He has a sword and shield. He's picking you up. He's doing all these nuts moves. Like fighting him again without a great grasp of the controls was pretty brutal. But I will say I didn't die to this guy. I whipped my bow and arrow out, and I was sniping him in the head. I was doing these jump. What's the game where you like jump to the side with your double pistols and everything goes slow-mo and you just like shoot everyone? It was like,
well, Max Payne.
Like Max Payne, but with the bow and arrow. That was definitely a move in this, which I love. So yeah, you could attempt different ways of fighting things. Like you could go more range, you could go more melee, you could use more of the environment to your advantage. Because when he does that charge attack that he just did then, if he hits a wall, he would actually get staggered. So there was a lot to play around with him. And again, this is just one boss out of many. And this is a humanoid boss as well, just like the Reed Devil. Although this guy's way more like bigger than the Reed Devil. Yeah. But there was like monster bosses, which we'll get to soon as well, which is really cool. So it's not just all human enemies. There's actually monsters that you fight, almost like witches. Like the next boss is like fresh out of like a witcher or something. Like it must be a folklore style like enemy or something. But yeah, the really cool thing, like you've said, is when you beat him, you get his shield, which looks really cool, and his sword, and it was an upgrade in the demo, so it was just a really small thing that was really cool to see. And it also got you in the menus a bit, which we don't have here, but you could see all of the stats and the equipment that you had. The crafting stuff was in there as well, which was really cool. And here you can see the Whitehorn boss, which had this whole like preamble on the way to finding him, where like bandits were trying to like sacrifice villagers to appease him because they thought it was like a vengeful spirit of the mountain or something like that. And you come along, I guess, doing a quest, and you're telling the bandits to stop, and then this guy shows up, obviously, to fight you because you've just taken away his meal that the bandits were delivering. Yeah. I'll just quickly say before I pass it to you that you could do this like Dragon's Dogma style mount mechanic thing, which I didn't get to fully experience, but you could climb on this guy if you jumped on him, and you could like grab onto him, climb all over him, stab him and stuff like that. So there was some like cool mechanics that you weren't even able to fully like test out or weren't explained, which is one of the biggest things I loved about Dragon's Dogma, which was the mounting. Yeah, one of the interesting things that the actual people that were hosting us from the Crimson Desert developer team said was like people were finding this game like pretty hard as well. So I haven't seen that many previews or people talking about their impressions, because a lot of people that actually went to play the demo were just getting slapped by like the difficulty. Really? But I found it like fun to play through that stuff, and the difficulty was like there obviously, but it was stupidly fun. But here we're on to I think it's a Queen Stoneback Crab, and I think this boss fight kind of sums up what an issue with the game is. Some of the things are way too specific and way too quirky. It doesn't feel intuitive. Like there's a lack of
intuitive gameplay to the game. And maybe you can talk about the problem here with the Spider-Man swinging into the backflip that you had to do.
Yeah,
very specific.
It's literally going to do it in a second. I'd make it look really cool and easy, and it wasn't easy to pull off. I will say, I think both this, as well as other people's impressions of it maybe being too hard, might come down to the controls not being intuitive and sort of standard, which is something I think that could definitely be worked on as feedback to make a bit more like straightforward and in line with like people's muscle memory from various other titles. But the objective here was to break different weak spots in the back, which he's already done, and is now to break the big pop thing on the top, which you would do through this jump and a nice swing. It looks so cool into a spinny attack, bam, and you defeat the crab here. Now, when we were doing this, the move did not function like that at all. I don't know if it was like a bug in the demo build or if we were just a potato at doing it, who really knows. But I will say I tried it for a long period of time. I definitely was doing the correct inputs because I was doing the move, but the swinging wasn't functioning as expected. So I think there is some things to polish and sort of work on in terms of the actual controls and execution of some of the combos. But what I can say is when you were able to pull them off, they looked very polished, very visceral, very satisfying. The actual moves were nice. It was crazy to do the sort of intro mission where there was loads of like barbarians fighting you at the same time, and you'd be like riposting one, perfect dodging another, going into like a body slam on another. It was pretty visceral and crazy. So I think there is huge potential for Crimson Desert, especially with the scope of the world that they're going for. I just really hope they'll listen to some of the sort of feedback to do with the controls and maybe a few of the combos that didn't feel intuitive. But anything else you want to add?
No, I'm super excited for this game. The game's not, I don't know if it's got a solid release date yet at the moment, but I'm super excited to try this out and really get hands on with this game, and I think people are going to love it.
I agree. So guys, make sure you're subscribed below if you want to see more on Crimson Desert in the future, and more videos on your favorite games coming very, very soon.
Bye-bye.